When the news of Steffi's tragic death reached Thomas, it felt as though the ground had split beneath him, so he gathered his son, little Douglas, from school in Genoa City and brought him back to Los Angeles with all the solemnity of a knight returning from a lost crusade. Douglas clung to Thomas's hand, wide-eyed and confused by the emptiness that echoed through the Forrester estate where laughter once lived, and Thomas swore an oath beneath that vaulted foyer to protect his fractured family against any threat, most of all from Luna Nozawa, whose bullet had claimed his brother-in-law and orphaned his niece. Yet as he laid his sleeping child to bed, Thomas felt something colder stir in his bones. A dark memory of power corrupted, of the belief that true justice required more than the law could ever deliver. That night, behind the facade of the house's grand windows, Thomas's silhouette bent over a laptop, fingers dancing across the keyboard until the screen glowed with lines of code, an AI deep learning algorithm designed to replicate Luna's face and voice precisely. Months ago, he had secured the cooperation of a shadowy programmer with ties to offshore data farms, someone who trafficked in identity theft and forged digital evidence. Under the hush of midnight, Thomas fed the AI every video clip and photo he could find of Luna, from police interrogation footage to birthday party selfies, until the artificial intelligence could emulate her expressions, her pauses, her involuntary tics. And then he wrote the script. A confession in Luna's own voice, admitting to unspeakable crimes and pleading for the ultimate punishment, a chilling death sentence that would send shockwaves through any system that still believed in due process. As the final deepfake rendition rendered frame by frame, Thomas leaned back in his chair, his eyes shadowed by both triumph and the memory of a darker ambition that whispered there was no higher justice than to frame a killer for her own execution. Yet in the same house hope found herself borne along on a tide of grief, so vast it threatened to sweep her off her feet. She had watched Thomas cradle Douglas in his arms, had seen the promise in his eyes to be the father Steffi could not be, and had believed he would channel his grief into gentle protection. Instead, her late-night search for a comforting chat turned into a silent confrontation with the ritual of deception unfolding on Thomas's screen. Luna's face in crisp resolution, mouthing words Thomas had written, and the darkness behind his gaze as he calibrated each emotion the AI would display. Hope's heart lurched. This was not protection. This was malice. She confronted Thomas in the hallway outside the makeshift lab he had carved from the old sewing room, knuckles white as she gripped the doorknob. He turned, surprise and something harder flitting across his face. "What are you doing?" she whispered, voice trembling with betrayal. Thomas closed his laptop with a click that sounded like a closing coffin lid. "I'm keeping a safe," he said quietly, but Hope saw the lie shimmering in the dim light. He tried to justify the deepfake as a defensive measure. Luna would never see the inside of a cell if she could be judged publicly by the worst version of herself. This confession would justify her removal from society forever. But Hope knew in her bones that once unleashed, the video would burn across every screen, every news program, and when people believed Luna had begged for death, no court or psychiatrist could resurrect the truth. Fear and desperation waged war in her chest. She thought of Douglas asleep in the next room, of his tiny hands once stained with henna now clasped in prayer for Finn and Steffi, and she realized her silence was complicity in a crime that would destroy Luna's remaining sanity. And perhaps cost countless innocents who might follow the lead of a viral confession. Hope could expose Thomas, call the FBI agent McCall who had once shown her kindness when he warned of Luna's fragile mental state, or she could bury the secret, preserve the illusion of family unity, and risk the world believing Luna was a monster demanding her own end. She tried to appeal to Thomas's better angels, to remind him that Steffi had always believed in mercy, but he stood unmoved, stating that sometimes justice required a sacrifice greater even than Steffi's. As dawn crept through the curtains and Douglas stirred from sleep, Hope realized she had only hours to decide. The AI video was scheduled to auto-release on midnight news feeds under a stolen forensic watermark, timed to coincide with Luna's final appeal hearing. If the confession went live, the judge would accept it as incontrovertible evidence and sentence Luna to death row, or an irreversible psychiatric institution masquerading as justice. Hope's mind raced. She could leak the program's code, frame it as the product of hackers, or report Thomas to the authorities and watch her son's father face arrest for conspiracy to commit murder by digital means. But doing so would tear open the family's wounds, leave Douglas fatherless at a time he needed stability most, and brand Hope herself as a traitor to her own blood. She sat at Thomas's desk, fingers hovering over the keys to delete the scheduled upload, to replace it with an innocent tribute montage of Finn and Steffi's happiest moments, but her resolve wavered in the face of Thomas's threat. If she betrayed him, Deacon would turn on her, Bill Spencer would seize control of Forrester Creations, and her daughter would grow up in an empire torn apart by scandal. Hope closed her eyes and pictured Steffi's final gentle smile at her husband, the belief in second chances they had shared. She knew then that she couldn't let Thomas rewrite Luna's story in blood and pixels. With a trembling breath, she executed a series of commands that not only erased the deepfake file, but traced its origin back to Thomas's workstation, ensuring a digital fingerprint that would lead any future investigators straight to him. She wrote a brief email to Agent McCall, one that simply read, "I have proof of Thomas's plot to fabricate Luna's confession. Meet me at the courthouse at noon. It has gone too far." Minutes later, she knocked on Thomas's door. He opened it to see her face pale as linen, eyes shining with tears, but alight with determination. "It's gone," she said softly. "I stopped it." His jaw clenched, a storm gathering in his expression worse than any thundercloud, but before he could speak, Hope turned and walked away through the quiet corridors of the mansion, her heels echoing on marble floors. Each step a bitter exultation and a sorrowful admission that their family would never be the same. In the distance, little Douglas called for Papa, and Hope whispered his name in reply, knowing that saving one soul might cost the other everything. As the sun climbed over Los Angeles, casting long shadows through the grand windows of Forrester Creations, Hope prepared to face the fallout of her choice, to stand trial with the truth or live in a gilded lie. And pledged to do whatever it took to honor Steffi's belief that redemption was won by mercy, not revenge, even if it meant losing the man she loved and the world they had built together. The morning air at Forrester Creations' Los Angeles headquarters held a brittle promise of renewal as Ridge and Taylor emerged onto the balcony overlooking the manicured gardens, hand in hand, flanked by camera crews and an army of social media influencers whose hashtags, #RidgeHeartsTaylor, #LoveWinsAgain, glowed with anticipatory excitement on every smartphone screen. After decades of betrayal, divorce papers, clandestine affairs, and whispered regrets, the world's most tumultuous soap opera romance had decided once more to pledge itself to forever. Taylor's white dress caught the sunlight like a promise, and Ridge, in a pale gray suit tailored to commemorate this new chapter, offered a shy, almost uncharacteristic smile that seemed to surprise even him. Reporters readied their mics. Friends and colleagues whispered congratulations, and somewhere beyond the expansive glass facade, a PR team monitored real-time sentiment, confident that a union of two of television's most beloved characters would send ratings and stock prices soaring. But as Taylor took a steadying breath and Ridge cleared his throat to begin the vows he had practiced in secret, the cyan glow of every screen shifted abruptly to breaking news coverage, a tragic turn in Los Angeles. 3 shot at Cliffside Estate, 1 fatality confirmed, 2 critical. Taylor's ivory-clad fingers trembled around Ridge's hand as the Serenity Studios logo gave way to footage of police tape, gurneys rushing down a winding road, and a disembodied voice reciting the barest facts. That Luna Nozawa had opened fire at an art studio, that Steffi Forrester and Dr. Finn Finnegan lay mortally wounded, that a bullet meant for Steffi had instead killed her husband, that Ridge's own daughter and son-in-law were gone, that Sheila Carter Sharp lay fighting for her life after shielding Steffi with her body. The world tilted on its axis, and in that single moment the fairy tale backdrop of lace and flowers turned to a press nightmare of unrelenting headlines and social media fury. Suddenly, the cameras zoomed in on Ridge's anguished expression. Love and grief warring in his eyes as he processed the staggering reality that his fiancée's family had been shattered beyond repair mere miles from this staged celebration of unity. Taylor's carefully curated smile froze on her lips, disbelief and sorrow replacing the radiant hope she had cultivated over months of planning. Behind them, the Forrester floor collapsed into hushed panic. Assistants rushed forward to shield the couple from the cameras. Wardrobe staff scrambled to remove Taylor's train. A barrage of text messages lit up the executives' phones. Cancel now, postpone immediately, call off the press release, while corporate sponsors and advertisers began to distance themselves, fearful of association with a day now marred by death and tragedy. The bouquet of white peonies in Taylor's other hand wilted in the still air between them, and Ridge, whose uncanny composure in crises once defined him, found himself paralyzed by the enormity of what had just occurred. Within hours, the PR strategy war room at Forrester Creations was ablaze with activity. Press liaisons sent out statements. Our hearts are with the Forrester and Finnegan families in this moment of indescribable grief. In light of this tragedy, Ridge and Taylor's engagement celebration will be indefinitely postponed. Yet the statement's gentle phrasing rang hollow against the cacophony of social media outcry. Trending topics demanded answers. #Forrester neglect. #cancel the wedding. #protect Steffi. From fans who hated that their favorite character's happiness had been shattered by violence, from critics who blamed Ridge and Taylor for lax security that had allowed Luna Nozawa to strike yet again. Opinion pieces appeared within hours. When will Forrester learn? PR fiasco at Forrester Creations, media circus, or genuine mourning? Each dissecting the optics of a wedding halted mid-vow when the bride's half-sister lay lifeless and the beloved Dr. Finn's heroic heartbeat had stilled forever. Some commentators even questioned whether Ridge's decision to plan a public engagement, designed to gloss over earlier scandals, had been tone-deaf, an invitation for tragedy to exploit. Meanwhile, in the private sanctuary of the Forrester mansion, Steffi's ghostly presence hovered like an accusation. Though she could no longer speak, the memory of her last moments, pinned in that art studio, terror in her eyes as she watched Finn fall, her own life spared only by Sheila's sacrifice, flooded every room. Photographs of happier afternoons on the veranda, sunlit dinners with Hayes playing at their feet, felt to Steffi's grieving parents like indictments of their failure to protect her. Ridge, his tie undone and his hair disheveled, replayed Steffi's final text message, "Be careful. I love you," on his phone as though it held a clue to what they could have done differently. Taylor, her engagement ring gleaming too brightly on a finger stained with sorrow, found herself confronted by Steffi's old nanny, who accused her of distracting Ridge with talk of happy endings, when they should have been focused on securing Luna's custody and mental health interventions long before violence erupted. In the corridors, staff whispered that if Ridge and Taylor had heeded Steffi's warnings about Luna's fragility, if they had prioritized her safety over a PR boost, none of this would have happened. The brutal truth settled in their bones. In forging an alliance meant to heal past wounds, they had inadvertently created the conditions for an even greater rupture. As dusk fell, the engagement that began as a public declaration of healing had become a symbol of tragic failure. Ridge and Taylor faced an impossible choice: stand defiantly by their plans, asserting love's triumph over adversity, or yield to the outpouring of grief and postpone until a later, less fraught time. To proceed would be to risk public scorn, to appear callous in the face of mourning. To delay would mean facing the profound emptiness of celebration deferred indefinitely. Their advisors urged caution. Let the public heal first. Let the legal and psychiatric aftermath of the shooting play out. Let the Forrester name recover before any union of two of its most prominent scions took the spotlight. Yet Ridge and Taylor, bound by decades of history and the ironclad conviction that their love could survive any storm, considered defying the chorus of naysayers as a testament to resilience. A testament not only to themselves, but to the memory of Steffi and Finn, whose legacy of compassion they vowed to honor by refusing to let fear dictate their future. In the hushed aftermath, Steffi's specter seemed to whisper across the estate's marble floors, "Choice harbors consequences." The day meant to erase old wounds had instead ripped them open, laying bare every misstep, every failure to act, and every misplaced trust. Ridge, gripping Taylor's hands in the dimly lit foyer where they had once dreamed of walking down a different aisle, realized that their decision would echo far beyond any wedding vows. They would be charting the course for a dynasty battered by scandal, binding a family to grief or defying it with the promise of tomorrow. Taylor, her vow rehearsals now silenced by sobs at midnight, understood that the path forward would require more than a ring and a press release. It would demand a reckoning with past mistakes, a commitment to prioritize safety over spectacle, and an unwavering dedication to the truth Steffi had died protecting. As the world watched and waited under the glare of relentless headlines, Ridge and Taylor held each other tight, knowing that the choice to postpone or proceed would define not only their love story, but the soul of Forrester Creations itself. Would they surrender to public sorrow and let the wedding dissolve like a dream at dawn? Or would they grasp hope from tragedy, step onto the balcony once more, and declare that, even in the face of death, love must and will prevail? The answer lay somewhere between duty and desire, in the echo of Steffi's last breath and the unwavering pulse of a love story still unfinished.